Alright, everyone knows that Cheerios are good for your heart. It says so on the box. Remember those heartwarming commercials? Ooh, Cheerios. They do pull on my heartstrings and reduces my risk of heart disease, right? Because it says so on the box.
Wait, can that actually be true though? Well, yeah, it says so on the box.
Dang, that is an appetizing picture of Cheerios.
My bowl of Cheerios never looks like this. This ain't real food at all.
Marketers are always looking for clever ways to sell their products. And on this Cheerios box, they're not really just selling an image, they're also selling an idea. And those get questioned around these parts. General Mills is doing about $5 billion in profit, and their number one product, of course, is Cheerios. In fact, Cheerios outranks its peers as the number one cereal in America. As a kid though, the Honey Nut Cheerios were my favorite. I was a different kind of kid. You guys enjoy your Fruit Loops and your Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I'm gonna take me some heart-healthy Cheerios with a dash of honey, eating them with my pinky out. Plus, Cheerios are part of a complete breakfast. Because a complete breakfast has all of this stuff. Who am I kidding? My breakfast has never looked like that. I was killing 2 bowls of Cheerios and going on about my day. The king of incomplete breakfast. We've associated Cheerios with simplicity. See? Simple, innocent. Big old heart on the box. They help to lower cholesterol? Or have we been under the veil of strong associative marketing? Has Cheerios fibbed their way to the top? Or am I being too skeptic? Maybe they do exactly what they say they do in lowering cholesterol. Let's find out. All right, let me put y'all on game real quick. I'm extremely picky with who we work with here at No Lab Coat Required, and I reject more sponsorship requests than I do tips when a cashier flips their freaking screen at me, because tipping culture in America is going out of control. But you know what else has gone out of control? Politics in America has gone out of control. Deception, lying, the fraying of institutional trust. We are in a time like no other. We need clarity, and now you do. With ground news. There is a system to how news works, and it's designed to manipulate you. Since news came out, and I mean since they were slinging newspapers on porches, you have never been given the full perspective. Intrusive algorithms, ads, and sensationalism has been how news has been delivered to you to put you in a cage and capture you. Ground news isn't the news. It's a news aggregate. It gathers articles of a story from around the world in one place with bird's eye context. You view the publisher's political leaning, reliability, and ownership. Check out this joint for example. News on the nutrition status of folks in Gaza. A ton of sources worldwide are reporting the subject. Check it out. Different outlets frame the same story differently. If you're anything like me, you hate algorithms, you hate ads, you hate the extra noise. For the first time ever, it's news on your own terms. I turned to ground news to inform my vote last year, to learn what the heck a tariff is this year, and to stay abreast of what's popping in the White House. And this is just so interesting to me because we love talking about bias here on the channel, and it's something that is inherent in all of us, right? And in the scientific context, it's something that we set up legitimate procedures to combat against. And we don't really have that for news. And this for me has become a platform that helps me set up procedures to actively combat my own personal bias, right? We can try our best to understand things with a wider perspective, and I'm all about that. Take advantage of 40% off their Vantage plan. Subscribe now by using my unique link below. Thank you, Ground News, for being a sponsor of No Lab Coat Required. Trailing behind Post Grape Nuts and Kellogg's Corn Flakes, looking to get a share of the then booming ready-to-eat cereal market, General Mills came out with Wheaties, cereal made from wheat. But they broke ground when they made the first ready-to-eat cereal derived from oats. Released as Cheery Oats in 1941, renamed in 1945, and it seems it was 1998 when the first heart-healthy message appeared on a box of Cheerios cereal. Oh, and you can also get them for $1.50. Cheerios comfortably nestled themselves in as the heart-healthy cereal. They were changing the game. They had a study to back them up. Cholesterol-lowering benefits of a whole grain oat ready-to-eat cereal. Subjects were given Cheerios to eat and had cholesterol measured, and eureka! It actually did the dang thing. Cholesterol actually lowered. The authors went on to conclude that 45 grams of a whole grain cereal reduced cholesterol levels by 4%. And the study was sponsored by none other than General Mills. I mean, who else would pay for a study on Cheerios? And a lot of people negate the science on a thing that is paid for by the people that make that thing. But honestly, I'd rather have a study on some food I'm curious about than to not. But either way, this study gave Cheerios a massive, brand new, heart-healthy advantage, and they put it right on the box. And in 2009, General Mills got a knock on the door from the FDA. Hey, you guys are presenting Cheerios as a way to address a disease, specifically hypercholesterolemia. And if that's the case, Cheerios technically qualifies as a drug. You're gonna have to take that claim off and return to your old box, because if it was the... Wait, that ain't Buzz. Who the heck is this on the box, B? The FDA said you either register Cheerios as a drug or you take this claim off the box. And General Mills fired back. Yo, the heart healthy claim been FDA approved for 12 years. 4% in 6 weeks, been on the box for over 2. The science ain't in question. Sorry. Just got back from a trip to New York. The scientific body of evidence supporting the heart healthy claim was the basis for the FDA's approval of it. And the clinical study supporting Cheerios' cholesterol lowering benefit is very strong. We look forward to discussing this with the FDA and reaching a solution. You've seen a Cheerio box lately, haven't you? Let's retrace. Around 98, we saw as a part of a healthy diet, the soluble fiber in Cheerios may help reduce cholesterol. 09 is when they decided to release the lower your cholesterol in 4% in 6 weeks box. And now I have with me here in 2025, can help lower cholesterol as a part of a heart healthy diet. It doesn't jump out at you, but these statements are drastically different. More on this later. In that letter they sent, the FDA was also saying that in order to qualify as a heart healthy diet, it should also include as much high fiber fruit and vegetables, and exclude as much as possible saturated fat. And that's probably where we get that part of a complete breakfast weasel phrase. But all of this has me thinking about that interplay of oats, digestion, and cholesterol. We gotta investigate. What's the supposed mechanism for how whole grain oats lower cholesterol? What's the evidence for or against this claim that we find on the box, and why am I holding it like this? But actually, what even is in the heck cholesterol? And why does any of this matter? The American Heart Association gave them a little certified check mark. Verified like Instagram. This is as legit as it gets. Where does your mind go when you think of cholesterol? Let's see, egg yolk. Do you think of artery plaque? Do you think of grease stains on the side of a deep fryer? Wouldn't it be nice to know what the heck cholesterol even is in the first place? You go to the doctor, you get your blood drawn, and you are given your cholesterol numbers. You're given HDL and you're given LDL. HDL is good, go up. LDL is bad, go down. Boom, end of story. But what if I told you that HDL and LDL are not even types of cholesterol? Yes, I am going there. I'll break that down more in a bit. What we want to know is what happens when we eat these. Let's start top down. Cholesterol is a type of fat, not the fat that you get when you pinch your tricep. I almost missed. I ain't got much there. I gotta eat more toaster strudels. You see, body fat just kind of hangs around as potential energy waiting to be used on the body. But unlike body fat, cholesterol is actually purposed to be used as material. It's a material for a few really cool things. It is the backbone material for estrogen and testosterone, right? These influential hormones that influence so much from sexual development to bone health. Cholesterol is nested right in our cell membranes, the literal cell wall, supporting them the same way columns support a building. Cholesterol is also used to make bile, and this is actually the most important cholesterol function that helps to explain why Cheerios is able to say they do what they do. If you forget everything I just said, know this: we can consume cholesterol, or we can make cholesterol, or what we call synthesized cholesterol. Cholesterol is that important that we have 2 inroads for the body to use it. The cholesterol circulating around in your body right now as we speak is 70% synthesized or homemade. So when it comes to lowering cholesterol, the greatest lever that we can pull is modulating how much of it we make, not how much we consume. Keep that in mind next time somebody tries to offer you some egg whites. So what Cheerios is saying is that there's something in these little round bites that manipulates your body to make less cholesterol. Have you caught on yet? I'm on a spinning stool, so it may get a little frantic. But listen, Cheerios has a crazy story. They just wait until you see what they got away with and how. But I actually brought you here for a more important purpose. I want you to think a little bit deeper about something very important. Heart disease is the #1 disease in the world. And here in America, you have a greater chance of dying of heart disease than you do rolling a 6 on a standard die. Sometimes, someone's first symptom of heart disease is death. Atherosclerosis, thrombosis can start developing at my age and even younger. And I'm a young guppy. I'll be 26 in August, on August 8th. Throw me some money in Patreon. What I'm trying to convey is that atherosclerosis starts early and is a silent killer, but it actually isn't the atherosclerosis itself, I'd argue, that's killing us. Cholesterol confusion, I'd say, is what is actually killing us. We just didn't know, but we learned a lot. We talk about cholesterol here often on this channel. It's nuanced, but I'll always do my best to elucidate some mechanisms to help us better understand, to navigate the real world. The earlier you know, the better, and we're about to get into it. But if you're older, you're still about that life. Ischemia ain't got nothing. Come see me, ischemia. Come see me. There's a problem here that we haven't talked about yet. Fat and water don't mix. So how does this cholesterol, this form of fat, right, do this circulating that I speak of, right? Because it'd be a pretty big problem if fat just traveled out in the open in the blood. We probably gonna die. So there's a well-designed vehicle to move fat around in the blood. It's called a lipoprotein or a lipoprotein. You really get to pronounce science words however you want. We're lipo people though. But yes, you have a ton of these little fat vehicles driving around in your blood right now. There are two types of lipoproteins. One is designed for delivering fat to where it needs to be. That's known as LDL. The other is in charge of scavenging for fat, picking it up, known as HDL. You guessed it though, if fat travels around in the blood in a lipoprotein and cholesterol is a form of fat, cholesterol must be a passenger in the lipoprotein vehicle. Think of the presidential motorcade. It'd be a pretty big problem if the president just traveled the streets out in the open, so he needs a vehicle. In fact, a motorcade with a little presidential flag. When we see this, we don't say, hey, it's a motorcade with a little presidential flag. We say, hey, look, it's the president. Same idea with LDL. We don't say, hey, it's a low density lipoprotein. We say, hey, it's cholesterol because it's the VIP passenger in the vehicle. And we had to clear that up because LDL as is not a problem. Fat needs to be able to travel where it needs to go. LDL is the vehicle for the job. We get that, but the reason that Cheerios it can lower cholesterol, dang near bigger than the logo itself, is because when you think of cholesterol, you think of deep fried heart attacks. The running scientific consensus for atherosclerosis is basically this. Cholesterol causes heart attacks. Too much LDL and LDL starts to crash out in and around our blood lining, and we develop plaque. Right here. Plaque builds up, it breaks loose, and then it travels until it's caught in a small artery, and then boom, we explode. Yes, this theory has so much intuitive sense, except it falls short of one fatal flaw when given just the slightest bit of scientific scrutiny. And that is, why would the body ever randomly have too much LDL just flowing around? Is LDL not a homemade item in the body? When something is homemade, when the body makes its own stuff, we call that endogenous. The fact that something is endogenous in the body is suggestive of it being homeostatically dependent. Johnny, what the heck are you talking about? Ooh, you're about to learn more about cholesterol than the average person will know in their entire life. Let's just say it. Cheerios actually do lower your cholesterol. Yes, there is scientific merit for what General Mills is saying about their Cheerios. If I give you this handful of Cheerios right now and you eat it, your cholesterol will lower. But what does that mean if cholesterol can still be homemade at any time the body needs it? If there's too much cholesterol in the body is going to absorb less of it from our meals and also slow down the synthesis of it in our cells. That is a totally regular, normal function of what we call homeostasis. You may have heard that word before. We like to refer to it as physiological balance. You see, the body doesn't really work with switches. It works with dials. If there's too much of something, we turn it down a little bit. If there's not enough of something, we turn it up. We're going to talk about what Cheerios do, what they do, right? But the point I'm making here is, even if I take down this entire box of Cheerios and I just cleared my blood of cholesterol, my body would rapidly find a way to replace that cholesterol because it does not see LDL as a threat. It sees LDL as homeostatically dependent. Well, geez, John, I just wanted a bowl of cereal. I'm sorry, I really am. But what I'm talking about is really only scratching the surface. We'd need an entire seminar to really break down the nuances of how LDL is modulated in the blood. We do know that the body is precisely regulatory. It runs a tight ship. We may not randomly have too much LDL, but LDL can malfunction. If you're interested in how atherosclerosis is actually developed, watch this video after. Now, let's talk about how Cheerios lower your cholesterol. I learned something new about Cheerios in my adulthood that I didn't know when I was a wee lad. This little thing here is made of oats. Oats are turned into flour, shaped and shot with a puff gun, double baked, boxed, and shipped to your grocer. And now you got Cheerios. Oats have what we call beta-glucan, a form of fiber. You see, the body is going to try to absorb everything we swallow, but there's just some stuff the body just does not have the tools to handle. Bring it to the stand, fiber. Take this sugar cube here, for example. As you could imagine, the body ain't got to do much work to break this down and absorb it. In other words, it's not resistant to absorption. In fact, we'll have this broken down and absorbed into the blood in no time, very early in our digestive tract. Well, why is that? Well, it doesn't have much nutritive complexity. On a scale of simple to complex, table sugar falls about right here. Think of things made with simple sugar. Candy, 2-bite brownies, Coca-Cola. Since they're simple, the GI tract ain't gotta put in much work to detangle the nutrients. They go right into the bloodstream and they go in early. This earliness is actually what causes them to be a bit problematic. Sugar isn't inherently bad, but when these simple sugars are rapidly absorbed into the blood, they cause a subsequent spike in blood sugar levels. Blood sugar is also one of those controls that's under the precise dial of homeostasis. If it's too high, we're gonna send in a special hormone you heard of before, insulin, to bring the blood sugar levels back down. Insulin comes in, finds any excess sugar, sends it to the fat cells, and that is a totally normal physiological response for the sake of homeostasis. But if our blood sugar is continually spiked over and over and often, we can essentially bog down this normal response. And our blood literally turns sweet like a chocolate river, and random proteins turn into caked agents. Our body becomes Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. This is essentially the process behind developing some of those telltale conditions, right? Diabetes, obesity, diabesity. And when we talk about the sugary pathology of developing these conditions, we gotta bring somebody to the stand, bringing in carbohydrates. And that's what we're looking at here. Let's look at some more. We can put strawberries here, more complex than a simple sugar. Oh, how about potatoes? Well, let's put oats here. These foods with more nutritive complexity possess something those other simple sugar foods don't: fiber. If we looked at fiber alone, it wouldn't even belong on this spectrum. It'd be somewhere over here, unable to be digested and absorbed. Why? Well, we don't have the enzymes for it. The body literally does not have the personnel to do this kind of work. So the fiber from the oat, for example, beta-glucan, is resistant to absorption, which means it's getting a lot farther than those simple sugars. In fact, it's traveling the entire length of the small intestine, mostly intact. On its way down, the soluble fiber disperses in water, but isn't completely dissolved. This forms a viscous gel. This viscous gel slows the entire digestive process. That's a good thing. It's the difference between pouring water and pouring honey. This slower digestive process slows down the intake of all nutrients, and that's a good thing, because now we're preventing sugar from coming in and just crashing into the blood in this violent way. Instead, there's a well-mannered transition of nutrients into the blood, and everything has this smooth delivery, nutrients, including sugar, which allows for insulin to respond more optimally. All right, Johnny, I appreciate the fiber lesson, but tell me, why are Cheerios saying that their oat rounds can lower my cholesterol? Well, actually, seriously, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy that fiber lesson to communicate to me that you're getting value out of this. But if you found that interesting, wait until you hear this. You remember me highlighting the bile thing earlier? This is where Cheerios claim to make their cholesterol lowering impact. What is bile? Bile is secreted anytime we digest a meal, and it is known as an emulsifier that is used to help us digest fat more easily. Bile is actually made up of cholesterol. Again, cholesterol is fat, so it's like, using fat to digest fat, right? It's like fighting fire with fire. It's that kind of thing. Fat is a lot to handle, right? So it comes in through a meal. Let's say we have some olive oil in the meal, and picture a big fat glob and then tiny pieces of fat being broken off of that glob. That is what bile is doing. It breaks down fat into smaller pieces. That's the emulsification process that we're talking about here. Remember, the body is mostly water, so we need a bunch of really clever ways to manage and maneuver fat, because fat and water don't mix. And that emulsification is basically the way that bile mixes water and fat in the body to help us digest it. I like to picture it if you think about like a cotton ball and ripping pieces off to make it smaller. Bile gets down to the end of the small intestine and is actually reabsorbed to be reused by the body. So enter in that viscous gel that beta-glucan fiber created. Where bile is supposed to be reabsorbed to be reused, it's instead trapped in the belly jelly. And since the belly jelly is fibrous, it's on its way to the rudder, and it's now bringing bile with it. Fiber is essentially taping bile's mouth shut, putting a sack over its head, tossing it in the back of a van, kidnapping it, and forcing it out of the body. You think your body's sweet, but these the streets. Now, if you're following, first off, pat yourself on the back, you're doing great. If you're completely lost, this is YouTube. You can just rewind. I'll wait. Actually, I won't. That's not how this works. If you're following me, you're probably gonna say, oh, cholesterol levels lower because bile is made of cholesterol and bile is being trapped by fiber and pulled out the body. That's how this works. That makes intuitive sense. That's actually pretty good. But that's actually not how Cheerios is doing what it's doing. In fact, at this point, I don't even know if Cheerios knows what we're about to go over. Remember, when you go to the doctor, they don't stick a needle in your colon, they stick it in your arm because they're measuring circulating cholesterol, circulating LDL. Or at least I hope ain't nobody sticking a needle in your colon. Bile is so crucial that when it's lost out the other end after becoming trapped by belly jelly, I'm so sorry, the body calls for the synthesis of more bile, which means it needs more cholesterol to do so. So it calls on the cholesterol circulating in the blood, which we know as LDL, right? LDL travels to the liver, gets repurposed for bile synthesis. It's then stored in the gallbladder to be used for your next meal. Yeah, in other words, the body ain't just getting rid of cholesterol because it freaking needs it, right? The body expects us to consume fiber. It knows it's coming. It expects to have to reproduce bile after each meal. It expects to lower its own blood cholesterol levels, not as a function of some heroic prevention of a heart attack, but just as a regular event of homeostasis. So the big reveal. Does Cheerios actually do all of this? Well, we gotta go back on how Cheerios are made. Oats are turned into flour, shaped and shot with the puff gun, double baked box, and shipped to your grocer. And now you got Cheerios. Here's one thing we have to understand about fiber. Remember, it's nutritively complex. When I was younger, I had a bin of cords, hundreds of random cords, back when there wasn't any Bluetooth and you had to plug stuff in.
That's the problem with this generation. Dang youngins ain't got to plug nothing in.
I used to hate having to go in there to find one cord because the cords be all tangled up. It'd be much easier to find the one cord I needed had they been untangled. This is similar to fiber. Check this out. We're actually able to absorb it if it's untangled. The number one rule of fiber is that it works best as a whole. That is basically what gives fiber its beneficial properties, allowing it to do what it does. But once fiber gets to us and it's already broken down, we're talking about a functionally different product. Remember, it's still a carbohydrate, so when broken down more and more, it essentially can begin to function more and more like sugar. When we process fiber, that's exactly what we end up getting. This is why drinking apple juice isn't the same as eating an apple. This is why whole grain wheat bread acts the same as white bread. Once a grain is deduced down and processed into flour, what you call it doesn't matter. The body sees flour the same way it sees sugar. Once the oats are turned into flour, shaped and shot with a puff gun, double baked box, and shipped to your grocery, we ain't really dealing with much fiber anymore. What's interesting though is that Cheerios knows this. On the ingredients list of their old boxes, you'll find they specified the brand, which is the fibrous part of the oat groat, was included in their oat flour. Now, the box I'm holding does not say that. I don't know why, but there could be many reasons. But here's what you need to know about cereal grains. Cereal grains undergo a commercial process called extrusion that breaks down the embedded fibers of a cereal grain. Now, virtually all foods have to undergo a degree of processing for us to consume them, especially grains. If you consumed an untouched oat groat, just a bowl of those, you'd probably bite all your teeth out, swallow and die. So foods have to be fermented, split, cooked, soaked, dried, heated, right? etc, etc. All of those methods determine how many nutrients we end up absorbing, how many nutrients we end up getting. Same goes for oat groats and Cheerios. So the question we're asking is, do these actually reduce cholesterol? And if so, by how much? So let's keep picking on them a little bit. You guys can tell, like, I probably chose violence against Cheerios this morning. They ain't done none to me. But they have this claim on the box here. 3 grams of soluble fiber daily along with a diet low in saturated fat and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease. A lot of stipulation in that. In 1992, a bunch of doctors came together and analyzed 20 studies, right? A meta-analysis to evaluate if oats can actually lower cholesterol. They found 10 of these interventional studies were able to pull it off. Participants that consumed the oat products reduced cholesterol by a tiny but significant 0.13 millimoles per liter. And to get there, participants had to consume an average of 3 grams of soluble fiber, funny enough. That meta-analysis was sponsored by Quaker Oats, one of General Mills' arch nemesis. You'd have to knock back about, wait for it, this many Cheerios in order to reach 3 grams of soluble fiber for an almost negligible return on investment. And that's not even taking into account that the Cheerios' fiber is structurally compromised. And that meta-analysis study from Quaker Oats, its subjects were eating oatmeal, oat bran, direct inputs from fiber, not oats that were turned into flour, shaped and shot with a puff gun, double baked and boxed and shipped to your grocer. In reality, you probably need even more Cheerios to reach 3 grams of fiber. So, do Cheerios lower cholesterol? Yes. In theory. In actuality, no. But here's the real kicker, in my opinion. Even if they did, it would just be a function of homeostasis, not necessarily something protective of heart disease. So one thing I'm happy of is the design for Buzz. Because who is this? Who is this? Buzz looks like an insurance adjuster. The FDA did go after General Mills' Cheerios, but the reason they were able to keep their heart healthy claim was because of the rule the FDA set in place known as the structure function claim. A food is able to talk about its ingredients doing stuff as long as it aligns with what we know nutrients to do for the structure or function of the body, not allowing the ingredients of a food to speak to how it could treat a specific disease. Acceptable phrases: vitamin C boosts your immune system, fiber regulates your bowels, antioxidants help to mitigate cell damage. And then there's Cheerios: lower your cholesterol 4% in 6 weeks. See the difference? It doesn't specify a nutrient that talks about the structure or function of something in the body. Instead, it sounds like something we'd literally hear on a drug commercial. So when Cheerios comes along and says it may lower cholesterol, it's a half-truth. That alone wouldn't satisfy the FDA's structure function claim rule. What may help lower cholesterol? And that's why we get this stipulative statement where they go into detail. It's the soluble fiber that does the trick, but also only in conjunction with less saturated fat. Oh, and less cholesterol. Since diets in saturated fat and cholesterol are known to perform a specific function, in this case, lower cholesterol, the diet can be coined as heart healthy. We end up with can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart healthy diet. And the FDA ends up approving a health claim that's the stretches of all stretches. I mean, you could dislocate your shoulder making this reach. So did they fool us? Yes and no. Great marketing can produce some warm feelings. I can't deny that. I want a bowl right now. But we need to remember that even though it can work emotionally, when we come prepared, it won't work rationally. Always read the ingredients, never drop out of school, watch No Lab Coat Required. In fact, no, I literally mean that last bit. You need to watch the video that YouTube is about to suggest you. That is one of the best ways to support this channel, is to watch the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video on your way out. I'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna get about y'all.